Hey boys, welcome back to B1 Hockey. Hope you liked our last video and you dropped a like.
If you didn't, go do it.
Today's video is going to be a fun one.
Unless you're a Wings fan.
Yeah, if you're a Wings fan, just
Get out of here.
Yeah, I don't even know what to say about that.
Yeah, we don't want you here. Go.
Today's video is a fun one. We just got a bunch of questions lined up, and I'm going to get everyone's opinion. We're going to break it down. Some of our opinions are good and some aren't. I'll let you guys decide on that. Without further ado, we're going to get right into it. So I'm Roy, and I'm with Jake and Adam.
What's up, boys?
To start off today, we're going to talk about who's on each of our hockey Mount Rushmores. So just to explain a little, this doesn't mean just NHL. I think international accomplishments should be included. And without further ado, Jake, why don't you start us off?
Okay, well, I think to start off, I have to have the name that I'm pretty sure all three of us have.
Yeah.
Gretzky.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
100%.
It explains itself. I mean, got the name the Great One for a reason. He's got a shit ton of NHL records. And I mean, just the best player of all time to show, or probably ever, if we're being honest here.
Yeah.
So, for obvious reasons, Gretzky's going to be on there. Next up, I have Lemieux. Now, I feel like this is also like a pretty obvious selection. I mean, there's many people who sort of claim he possibly could have been the best NHL player if he didn't get hurt or and was away for as long as he was. But I mean, Lemieux was also just another absolute stud of a hockey player, all around beast, incredible player overall. So yeah, Lemieux there. Next up, I have Maurice Richard. Now, I mean, listen, you don't get a trophy named after you for no reason. I mean, this man absolutely tore it up back in the ages. I mean,
First guy to score 500 goals.
Exactly, right? Like I usually say, you don't like yourself into that, right? So, I mean, Guy is absolutely incredible offensively. Made a movie about the guy. I mean, I don't know how many movies they've made about other NHL players, considering the fact that hockey is a rather small sport compared to the NBA, the NFL, MLB. Should be bigger in my opinion, but that's just me. That's why I have Richard there. And then I figure, well, we have to have a defenseman in there, right? Bobby Orr.
Yeah, good pick.
Bobby Orr. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think arguably one of the most famous sport photos of all time is that photo of him scoring that Stanley Cup win, getting absolutely yeeted. So, yeah. I mean, I would say probably the best defenseman of all time. That's just me. So,
yeah.
So,
all right.
Those are my four.
Can I take over here, Jake?
Take her away.
I did mine a little bit differently. I tried to include kind of one of each side, 2 forwards, 1 D-man, and a goalie. Right. So obviously I'll start off with Gretzky. That's an easy one. He's got the most goals. He's got more assists than anybody else has points. So if you have him off your Mount Rushmore, then you're just wrong. Second is going to be a more controversial one because it's an active player. I have Sidney Crosby.
Oh.
Not John Scott. I think he's played more games than Lemieux. Lemieux, I think the thing that holds him back is just his longevity in the NHL just wasn't that great. And he's also played in a harder era to score in. So it's kind of harder to compare the stats because I think if Sidney Crosby played in Gretzky's era or in Lemieux's era, I think he'd put up some crazy stats too. But he's got 190 playoff points, which is something you can't just look over. And the golden goal is one of the things that puts him on the Mount Rushmore. I think that's probably right up there with Bobby Orr's picture there. I think the picture after Crosby scores a golden goal is right up there. And he got 3 cups in 9 years. And that's another thing, you have to take championships into account. He's got 1 more than Lemieux. He's scored more points than Lemieux. He's played more games than Lemieux. Actually, I don't know if he scored more points. But I have Crosby number 2. Number 3 for my D-man, in my opinion, the best D-man of all time, Nick Lidstrom. It could be Orr is also, definitely could be there. But Lidstrom has seven Norris trophies, 4 Stanley Cups. And another thing, one of my criteria was the longevity and the consistency, where he played at least 75 games in 18 of the 20 years that he played. So he's a guy that you can depend on every single year to put up, 60 to 80 points and play some crazy defense. And he's played 260 playoff games. So I have him on my Mount Rushmore. And finally, for my goalie, I have the Dominator, Dominik Hasek. He has 6 Vezinas, 2 Stanley Cups, a career 922 save percentage in an era where there was more scoring and all that kind of stuff. And he had a 68-game campaign where he had a 937 save percentage. That's like unheard of numbers. He had a couple, they used to be called Lester B. Pearsons, but the Ted Lindsays. And so I think he's the best goalie of all time. So he's on my number 4 on my Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up Crosby there, just because I think as great as Crosby was, he's been the greatest guy in the league for years, up until McDavid came and whatnot. But people still seem to underrate his career and what he's done and what he's accomplished. With that being said, he's not on my Mount Rushmore, but he deserves to be up there.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Now, mine's going to be pretty fast here, as all 4 names were named already. But I'm just going to go ahead and say them all: on Wayne Gretzky, Mario Lemieux, Bobby Orr, and Dominik Hasek. Gretzky and Lemieux are probably the 2 best hockey players of all time. And the crazy thing about that is that Mario Lemieux didn't even play 1,000 games. So who knows how good he could have been if he played longer. Bobby Orr, probably the best defenseman of all time, or at least the most dominant defenseman. Nick Lidstrom might have been an overall better defenseman, but Bobby Orr dominated the game. And then just moving on, Dominik Hasek, I think there's a span where he had 5 Vezinas in 6 years. That's just unheard of in today's league. And that was before the NHL lockout, where scoring just dropped down. So I think you got to give him all the credit in the world. And that Stanley Cup final overtime where he lost to the Dallas Stars, that's just a shame for him. I know there's the debate about
foot was in the crease.
He was that close to getting another Stanley Cup with the Buffalo Sabres, actually. And
Which isn't a fucking accomplishment in and of itself.
That would have just propelled him even more.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on, I got another question. There's a bunch of rumors this year that if the NHL 21 season does happen, because of COVID traveling restrictions, there will be an all-Canadian division in the NHL. So who do you guys think would win that division if it happens? And then after that, we're going to talk about, once we name our division winners, which other 2 teams or 3 advance to the Stanley Cup playoffs, depending on how the NHL formats their playoff runs.
I'll kick it off. All right. So if we're starting off with who's going to win the division, I really hate to be that guy who always chooses his team, but just based off of their additions over this offseason so far, and it's very likely they're going to make more trades. I highly doubt Dupes is done. I'm going to go with the Leafs. I mean, sure. Yeah. Hey. Okay. Yeah. You go ahead and pick your Habs, bud. But listen, I mean, you even saw on Instagram today where they had Matthews and Tavares ranked number 3 duo for centers.
Center duo.
So, I mean, yeah, I'll give them that. And they also have Marner, Nylander. You got Hyman, who absolutely busted out of his shell last year. I mean, and their defensive core is already significantly improved. So, I mean,
not a bad pick.
And if Anderson can be the way he performed in the not even the first round of the playoffs, because he actually stood on his head. So, I mean, I'm going to have to give it with them. I will say Vancouver's a close second.
Yeah, wouldn't surprise me. Not a bad pick. So, what about you, Roy?
Well, just to argue with Toronto a little bit there, I just don't think the depth is there. You guys are a little weak in your bottom six. And even in the goaltending, Frederik Andersen, who knows? Look at some of these other goalies in the league, like Carey Price. Connor Hellebuyck just won the Vezina, and he was a finalist a couple of years ago.
You got the Holtby and Demko tandem too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it'll be tougher for Toronto than you think. I also think that it's hard to see how these teams will do against each other, because obviously the Western and Eastern teams only see each other twice a year. With that all being said, I have the Winnipeg Jets. Like
Really?
I just said,
What the fuck?
Who's just coming off of the year. And their weak point last year was defense, but they added Derek Forbort, Dylan DeMello, and then they re-signed a couple other guys on offense, and their top six is arguably just as good as the Leafs, with Scheifele, Patrick Laine could be a 50-goal scorer, Kyle Connor, Nikolai Ehlers, Blake Wheeler, etc. And they traded for Paul Stastny actually, so. I have the Winnipeg Jets just because I prefer their depth over Toronto's, and their goaltending. So that's my opinion.
I don't know about that pick. I know they got Pionk, the fucking goat, but I think they rely a little bit too much on their first line. So if they can't stay healthy, and they haven't been in the last few years, that's a problem for them. And Hellebuck's been a little bit inconsistent, where he has like a Vezina season, and then he has an awful season, and then he has a Vezina season, and then he has an awful season. So I think it's not a bad pick again, but it's not my pick. I have the Detroit Red Wings. No, I'm kidding. I have
in Canada. Not in Canada.
I have the Calgary Flames. If we're talking about strictly finishing first in that division in the regular season, I think the Flames could definitely do that. Obviously, they finished first in the West, more than a year ago, but 2 seasons ago. They could do it again. Their offense is insane, and they finally have that number one goalie they've been looking for. Obviously, I lost TJ Brody. That hurts. But I do think that Markstrom kind of makes up for that loss in defensive ability. So I have Calgary for my topic.
I just think Calgary lost a lot on defense. Like, obviously they still have Giordano and Hanifin, Valimaki. I don't know, do they still have Travis Hamonic?
I'm pretty sure they do, yeah.
So obviously they still have a solid core, but and they added like Tanev, and Markstrom obviously helps the team. But I honestly see Calgary being near the bottom of this Canadian division. The Canadian teams, I think they're all almost on an even playing level.
Yeah.
And I think Calgary they don't have the stardom that other teams do. Neither does Montreal, but Montreal is a lot deeper. Yeah. I just don't see how Calgary matches up against all these other Canadian teams if those are the only teams they're playing all year.
I will say, yeah, go ahead.
How much different is their team than 2 years ago when they finished first in the West, right?
Oh, yeah, I agree with that. And like I said, they improved with Markstrom and some other depth pieces, but I just don't know. Like, you see their team, Johnny Gaudreau's their offensive star, and he's been terrible.
Brady Tkachuk.
Mm-hmm. But that's just the one guy, though, right? Because Johnny Hockey, he's been sort of east lately.
I'm not. That's what we're saying. We're not talking about playoffs right now, right? We're talking about who's going to finish first in that division.
I know, but if you can't have your so-called offensive beast of a guy, Johnny Hockey, not performing for you to what he usually can, like.
And Tkachuk, though. Tkachuk is arguably better than Johnny Hockey.
Okay, but that's just the one guy then.
That's 2 now.
Okay, but we
1 plus
we were
1
just,
is
we
2,
were just,
Jake.
dude, we're just saying how Goudreau hasn't been
Toronto
what he has
fans don't
been.
know that.
I don't know. I think you guys would be surprised. I think their defense is still very good, even though they lost TJ Brody because they did add Brendan Tanev. And I think that the fact that they have Markstrom now adds them a couple wins that they weren't getting when they had, Talbot. So,
I mean, personally, I'm surprised nobody said the Habs, actually.
where do you guys think the Habs finish?
Top three.
If they get there.
I think around the third, maybe the second spot, they just lack the superstar to bring them to number one. Their team doesn't have necessarily a hole anywhere, but they also just don't have that top guy to bring them over the top.
Yeah, there's no arguing that. But they do have basically, 3 second lines. Or maybe a fringe second, third line. But, you look at their top 9, it's pretty unreal. And they have, maybe 7 guys who can give you 20 goals, 20 tucks on a consistent basis.
Mm-hmm.
And they have 3 or 4 guys, I can't remember, who have scored 30 in their career. So
and also their defense, right? I mean, their defense, of course, actually pretty well. I mean, you were saying a lot more than just that.
Not top 10, but
it's top 10.
Top 10.
It's top 10, boys.
Yeah, I heavily disagree. But the thing is, though, their defensive core is still pretty good. And if Price can be Price.
And we got Jake Allen.
Okay, calm down there, bud. Calm down.
No, that's a good backup.
You hope.
I mean, you hope. Who the fuck is the Leafs backup?
What do you – Jack Campbell, boys.
Jack Campbell. Would you rather have Jack Campbell or Jake Allen?
Jack Campbell.
That's a lie. Jake. Die in a hole.
Okay, moving on. Just stay in the Canadian division. Who do you guys – so let's say – I don't know how the NHL is going to format the playoffs because you can't really do a wild card team if there's no traveling. Who do you guys think finishes last in the Canadian division?
See, like you were saying, they're all on the same playing field.
Ottawa improved.
And guys, let's face it, they're gonna win in the next 4 years.
No, I think it'll still be Ottawa.
Yeah, it's still gonna be Ottawa.
I think just because their team is still young. Obviously, they added some pieces, but they were last. But in the Canadian teams, right, by such a wide margin that I don't know if adding Dadonov and Matt Murray makes up for that. So I still got Ottawa dead last, but closer than they were last year.
Yeah. I mean, I had Stutzel there too because he's absolutely going to hop right into the show, right? So.
Well, it depends. It depends when the NHL restarts, right? Because he might start off wherever he's playing in Germany, right?
Yeah.
And he might finish. The Ottawa might just tell him to finish the season there, honestly, because I don't think that they're going to be a playoff team anyways. So, yeah. Who do you guys have?
Well, not going to lie, if Calgary didn't sign Markstrom, I would have had them coming last. I think they're a team who, in some point in the next couple of years, they're going to give up on their core because their core, in my mind, is not good enough to win a Stanley Cup. They have good guys. Tkachuk maybe can be that great guy, but not a great enough guy to win them a Stanley Cup. So I just think they don't have enough to be there. But because they signed Markstrom, I don't know, because he's coming off a couple of good years. And I think Ottawa is clearly the worst team in Canada. Yeah. So I'm going to say them, but just to try to be different, I would have said Calgary, but they made it hard. And all of these teams are so close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
insane.
Well, the parity in the NHL right now is just crazy. You could say any team other than the fucking Detroit Red Wings could realistically make the playoffs, I think. Mm-hmm. Right? I wouldn't be surprised if name me some bad teams. Fucking I don't know. LA, if they made the playoffs, I mean it'd be pretty surprising, but it wouldn't be fucking when pigs fly, you know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know. The parity in the NHL is just crazy. I would have said also Winnipeg is up there if they hadn't have picked up Stastny. I think Stastny actually brings a lot to that team. But who do you have, Jake, for your last?
Sens, without a doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, there was such a wide gap between them and the rest of the Canadian teams last year. I mean, yeah, sure, they added some pieces. They got an actual good goaltender now, but I don't think that just adding Matt Murray back there, and yeah, sure, they added Dadonov, but I don't see that closing the gap.
Yeah.
Okay,
All right.
we're going to stay in Canada here for the next question. Which Canadian team wins the Stanley Cup first?
Start it off, Jake. Motherfucker, if you say the Leafs, I'm fucking leaving.
No,
I'm kidding.
I don't want to be that guy. Don't get me wrong.
Too many times for it to be true.
Jake, you are that guy now, so just go with it.
You know what?
You're our Leafs guy.
Canadians.
Oh yeah. Jake, what the fuck, man? You're taking my fucking talking.
So now you have to choose the Leafs.
All right, so go ahead. Talk about how great the Habs are.
No, in all honesty, no, I can't do this myself. No, I'm going to actually go with the Leafs, though. But like I said, they got that 1-2 punch, first two lines. Their defensive core has significantly improved. I don't have to say it because I said it enough times in the last few episodes. But, like,
yeah.
It like you guys have said, it is really, really close. It could be a number of the teams. Like, it could really be anybody 100%. Except for the Sens.
What do you think, Roy?
I'm going to talk about one of the Canadian teams we haven't really touched on yet. In this episode, anyway, the Vancouver Canucks. I think every Stanley Cup winning team needs 2 elite centers, a number 1 D, and a number 1 goalie. You look at Vancouver, they have Pettersson, Horvat, Hughes, and potentially Demko. And these guys are all young. I think Horvat's the oldest, and he's like 25. I just think in 5 years, this could be a great team. They lost a lot of depth pieces, but the core is just built there, and it's harder to get the high-end guys than it is the depth guys.
What's so funny there, Adam?
Nothing. Roy just sent me something. All right. What are you saying? Sorry?
I was just talking about how Vancouver's going to win the Cup.
All right, well, fucking – what the fuck, Jake? Why'd you cut him off like that? I was just laughing at what the fuck he sent on Instagram.
What, that Leaf signing?
What?
Yeah, the Bokonji Imama. Is that even fucking this guy? I've never seen that, man. I know. All right, we'll cut this part out. You want to restart your Vancouver thing?
Yeah, I will.
Sorry, boss.
I think the Vancouver Canucks will be the first Canadian team. We haven't really touched them in this video, but they have the core out there to be a good team. Look at all the Stanley Cup winners. They had 2 good centers, the number 1 defenseman, and a solid goalie. And you look at what Vancouver has been building here with Pettersson, Horvat, Hughes, and Demko. And these guys could all be elite at their positions in their prime. Obviously, Horvat, I think, is already 25-ish. But even then, he still's got a couple years to improve. I could see him being in the Selke candidate in a couple years with Pettersson being the Art Ross. And that's just like how Chicago had Kane as the Art Ross guy and Taves as the Selke guy with Keith as the Norris. So I think they're a young team that just has an elite foundation to build around. And even though they lost a lot of depth this offseason, it's a lot easier to acquire depth than it is these core pieces. So I'm going to go with the Canucks.
I don't know. It's definitely a good pick. They did lose some stuff in the offseason, but they added, obviously, recently Nate Schmidt, Coke Boy himself. So it's not a bad pick. That would have definitely been probably my 3rd pick. But my number 1 pick would be the Edmonton Oilers. If you look at the history of the NHL, all the great players, Gretzky eventually won a cup. Fucking Lemieux eventually won a cup. Crosby eventually won a cup. All these guys. Ovi eventually won a cup. Yeah, you name it. All the greats eventually win a cup. So I think it's only a matter of time before the rest of the Edmonton Oilers, outside of Nuge, Draisaitl, and McDavid eventually kind of put it together and build enough of a supporting cast to support McDavid and Draisaitl to be able to carry them to the finals. You know, I don't think anyone would be surprised if McDavid put up like a 35-40 point playoff or something like that. So it's only a matter of, you know, maybe their goaltending getting really hot at some point, and that would make them Stanley Cup finalists or champions eventually.
Yeah, it's always hard to go against the best player in the NHL, and especially when you also have a guy who's coming off of a Hart Trophy as your second best player.
Yeah.
And then they added Jacob Markstrom, obviously, and Tyson Barrie. And they have a lot of young prospects coming out, like Evan Bouchard. Their team, obviously, not a bad pick. This Canadian division, they're all so even. It's hard. But I think we're going to end the video soon here. I hope you guys liked what we did. If you have any ideas for a future video, leave a comment. Or leave a comment if you just hate the Leafs and want to mess with Jake.
Or the fucking Red Wings.
Or the Red Wings, just because, like, what do you guys got going for you?
Fuck the Wings. Start the hashtag.
We'll see you guys next video and hope you enjoyed.
Thanks, boys.
Cheers.